I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
We'd like to dedicate this week's episode of Crime Writers On to our good friend Merritt Fowler and her Penty.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
Looking for a new fast-paced, nail-biting thriller to fill the Dexter and Hannibal-shaped holes in your life? Check out Hangman, a new novel by Jack Heath. Hangman introduces a darkly mesmerizing FBI consultant whose skill at finding criminals comes at a price. Every time he saves a life, he takes one. Hangman is available on Audible and everywhere books are sold. Visit bookclubish.com to learn more about Hangman by Jack Heath and start reading today.
Why is your hand in my sack?
What?
You've got my snack pack.
Oh, a snack pack.
My Kind snack pack. You can try 20 Kind snacks when you join the Snack Club. Enjoy 50% off and free shipping from your first snack pack when you subscribe to it through Snack Club Kind's monthly snack subscription service. Go to kindsnacks.com/crime for more details. That's kindsnacks.com/crime to learn more and subscribe to the snack pack.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On, the podcast about other podcasts and also about true crime, pop culture, journalism. And this week, we review the RFK tapes, the podcast that puts a conspiracy theorist behind the mic to talk about the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. We'll also unpack those final 2 episodes of In the Dark, Season 2. And along the way, Lara Bricker might have a series of strokes, a heart attack, or fall into some sort of rage-induced coma. Joining me now with defibrillator in hand is my true crime co-author and real-life husband, Kevin Flynn. Good evening, Kevin.
I'm ready to serve.
In underwear only. Can you just tell me what's going on over there?
There is no air conditioning in Studio C. It's not Studio AC at all. So, like normal.
Is that a little fan?
No.
Who has a little fan going?
I think that's Toby's little fan you might be hearing.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to turn it off?
No.
I want you to bring it over. Jesus Christ.
It's 100 degrees out. I think our listeners can deal with a tiny bit of fan noise tonight. And just know that Kevin and I may actually die of heat stroke while recording this podcast.
You need to take your pants off.
Nope. But I am saying, if anybody wants to support our podcast at the $1,000 a month level at Patreon, maybe we could move this studio into a cooler space that's temperature controlled, and we would not suffer so much.
Temperature control, that's the problem.
And finally with us is the author behind the brilliant series of novels called The City Trilogy, and our resident cynic and book club wrangler, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
Well, guys,
you skipped me.
I did? You're right, I did.
I was thrown off.
Shit, sorry. Sorry about that. I thought I'd already introduced you. Sorry, I'm going to do it again.
It's because I butted in. I'm sorry.
Also with us is journalist, true crime author, former defense investigator, licensed private investigator, and amateur feral cat rescuer, Lara Bricker. Hello, Lara.
Hello. It's all in. I've reached a new level of catdom.
We know. Now, guys, I have an announcement for you about our next episode, which will be airing in 2 weeks. I know one of the things we'll be talking about, so I'm just giving you the alert now that you need to watch it so we can talk about it. We're going to be discussing the first couple of episodes of the HBO series Sharp Objects. That, of course, is based on the novel of the same name by, Kevin, is it Gillian or Gillian Flynn?
Gillian Flynn.
Are you sure?
Yep.
All right, Gillian
I've heard
Flynn.
people say it differently.
So
but-
have I.
Those other people were wrong. It's actually Gillian. Yeah.
Well, and if you have a podcast, listeners, or TV program you'd love to hear us review this summer, make sure to let us know because we're only releasing episodes every other week. So we're probably going to be talking about like 2 things every episode is probably how it's going to go unless some like huge news breaks in true crime. You can send us an email at crimewriterson@gmail.com. But before we get into our content, there is one thing that we need to talk about that is a bit of a diversion.
All right.
Lara Bricker,
Yes.
I have seen a lot of photos of you that you've been posting on social media with some mangy ass cat.
Yes.
What the hell is going on?
Well, here's how it all started, Rebecca. I was like at my sink one day and I looked out the window and there's this cat just like sitting in my driveway staring at me. And I'm like, Ken, what the fuck? There's like a Stephen King cat in our driveway. It's like some Pet Cemetery cat. So this is probably like 3.5 weeks ago now. We keep seeing this cat, but it's like running away. So finally I'm like, I'm going to get this cat. So I get a picture of it. I have conducted a full-scale investigation of the cat. I have gone through the entire neighborhood. It's somebody I think just abandoned this cat. So he is now Stephen King is now living in my barn. While I am awaiting Betsy. You may remember Betsy. She got us Stampy, our beloved Stampy. She's the feral cat rescue woman. She's a little backed up because there's been a lot of feral cats procreating right now, recreating whatever they're doing.
I wonder why. I've seen photos. Stephen King, the cat, has a giant set of balls, Lara Bricker.
Stephen King needs to have.
He's intact.
Going to have a. Yeah, that's what they said. Well, she's like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Listen, Betsy, he's got balls. Like when he walks, he kind of like dips down."
You're like, "Listen,
Okay.
Betsy, 100 people on Twitter have told me that he has balls, so they have to be balls."
He has balls. But he's a very nice cat, despite his big balls and his issues. He's very mangy. So I don't know. There's a great debate in the household right now because Betsy's like, well, he'd probably just like to live in your barn, and Fireman Ken is like, no. He's like, when I met you, I had 1 cat. That cat died. We got 2 cats. One of those cats died. We got 2 more cats, bringing us to 3.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna have 4. So stay tuned because unfortunately, Zelda, the weirdy cat that we have in our house, who doesn't like anybody, really likes Stephen King.
Kevin, you're not a cat person.
I'm not.
What do you think should happen here?
With what? Well, like
should Lara get to keep this cat or not?
I would say, Fireman Ken has been through a lot with you, Laura.
Really?
And I'm saying if Bridget from Flinttown could give up her dream of going to the FBI for her man Robert, then I think you could give up your dream of having a 4th cat for the sake of your marriage.
Yes, but what does having a 4th cat hurt anyone? Lara wouldn't be moving away to be with the 4th cat.
And it wouldn't even you wouldn't even know it was here because it just lives in the barn.
Right. Killing vermin, doing a job. It'd be a cat with a job.
Yep.
I think he should haunt the barn.
Haunt the barn.
Yeah, it's 3-1. 3-1.
Uh-oh. So stay tuned. He's got the snip coming on Thursday. So I'm told he'll be a very different cat after that.
Right.
Maybe
On
Zelda
many
will
levels.
change her mind.
Yeah.
All right, Kevin, we have one of these that we need to get through.
Love mail.
We got an amazing listener email this week. And this is like peak podcast fan listener email.
Mm-hmm.
This was from a man who also sent a photo. And I'm just going to say up front, he is very handsome. I come to Bay St. Louis a lot. Food for $1 with a fuel top off, he says. My plane broke down today, so I decided to head into town with a crew car in search of the mythical yoga loft above the bodega. I found the corner, he writes. Unfortunately, the owner wasn't in. Not the greatest selfie, but I had just had an awkward encounter in the bar, and I was trying not to make it obvious as I was taking a photo from Lieutenant Derek Derelict Green. So we have a listener who's in the military. He's a pilot.
Yep, Navy pilot, yep.
And he occasionally flies to Bay St. Louis, Mississippi which, by the way,
For the yoga, I think.
for super fans of our show, you know that the current Patreon sponsor, who's like named our studio, is the owner of the Yoga Loft above the bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. This handsome pilot lieutenant made an extra trip to just see the door of the person currently sponsoring our studio.
And we're praising him for this?
If you've
Or we should feel sad for him.
Have you seen his photo?
It's a pilgrimage.
It's a pilgrimage.
I'm all
yes.
over it. You know why? I mean, it was almost fate because next to the yoga loft was like some sort of parrot head bar.
Yes.
That's right.
And I was like, this is fate right now.
Yeah. Now, if you subscribe to the Crime Writers on email, you will have seen a photograph already of
That's right.
Lieutenant Derelict. Yeah.
Green. Derelict Green. He's very handsome. Toby, what do you think? Is this like this guy out of his damn mind?
No, I highly encourage it. If you're in Bay St. Louis, stop by the yoga loft.
You know who's never going to go to Bay St. Louis? Lara Bricker, because she's never stepping a damn foot in the state of Mississippi.
Well, that's not true. If somebody is running against Doug Dog Evans, I will be down there.
All right, you're going to pass out flyers, hang up posters, do door-to-door knocking.
Hold the sign, yeah.
I'm going to be on the campaign trail.
That's actually super interesting. If like one of our listeners decided to like run the campaign for Doug Evans' opponent, Lara Bricker could be the fiscal agent and campaign manager.
That'd be fun.
All right. Well, we are going to like flip the script a little bit this week and do our main topic podcast review in the first half of the show, only because we really want to save our conversation about In the Dark for the second half of the show for time. So we're going to discuss now the RFK tapes. This podcast comes from the creators of Crime Town. The RFK tapes is an audio documentary that takes a look at the 1968 assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. For 50 years or so, authorities have claimed the case was open and shut. Sirhan was captured at the scene, gun in hand. He admitted to the crime and is serving a life sentence, but some say there's evidence of a larger conspiracy.
Sirhan was locked away, and all the evidence collected by police, photographs, bullets, and hours of witness recordings, that was locked away too.
We've done it because someday, somebody, for purposes best known to themselves, is going to try to prove that Sirhan didn't do it, that this was a conspiracy. We knew it would happen.
Well, 50 years later,
It wasn't an investigation at all. It was a big cover-up.
it's happening.
So the RFK tapes is going to be 10 episodes long. There are 4 or 5 episodes out now, depending on how you count them. They include rare recordings, new interviews with people who were there to try to understand what happened and this assassination. And of course, the host is Zach Stewart Pontier, who we know from Crime Town, and Bill Klaber, who we'll talk about in just a second. As usual, we will be discussing spoilers from the RFK tape. So if you would like to just listen to our thumbs up, thumbs down, spoiler-free review, look at the timestamp indicated in the show notes. Now, Toby, we've heard the story about RFK's assassination. We've seen the film. How aware were you before listening to these episodes about the sort of mainstreamness of the conspiracy theories around RFK?
I did not know that there was any conspiracy theories around this. It seemed like it was one of those, like you don't hear a lot about it, even though, as I've found out, there are people who talk about it who are credible.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a mainstream conspiracy theory at all. JFK is a mainstream conspiracy theory. People know about that. RFK, I mean, this seems really out there because, as they set up in the beginning, Sirhan shot him in front of a whole bunch of people,
including some celebrities.
Yeah,
and there was
Rosie
video.
Greer and
yeah, but the thing that I didn't understand, I guess, was how sort of chaotic and crowded and confusing, like the actual event was, like when he was shot. I pulled up this Washington Post article from fairly recently about how RFK Jr. Went to visit Sirhan and like definitely buys into the fact that there are questions that need to be answered, that he doesn't think it was Sirhan by himself. So anyway, I think one of the things I thought was weird after reading that was this is kind of, he sets this up like it's just so weird that my dad happened to have this tape that was from this guy who has this conspiracy theory. And then, we go and we talk to, and then there's Allard Lowenstein and all this stuff. But in fact, it's not really just this one guy in upstate New York who has this theory. It's like a larger, it's something that more people are kind of aware of and buy into. So it seemed like beyond the fact that maybe that was his introduction to it or conspiracy theories in general, like you're definitely left with the impression, at least I was, that here's this guy who by himself has kind of pulled together this conspiracy theory, and that's not actually the way it is.
Right. Well, he does have all the tape, though, which is super interesting, and he sort of made it his life's work to pull all this material together.
And convenient for the
totally
podcast.
Convenient. And I just want to talk about like the structure of it and the way they sort of make this change between episode 1 and 2. I mean, I think that Zach introduces Bill Klaber. He does this great little piece of narration where he talks about having first been introduced to the idea of this conspiracy theorist sitting in the backseat of his dad's car and listening to the radio show, the Fringe radio show that Bill Klaber made.
Right.
And then he goes to his house and interviews him, and it's sort of like, here's this weird guy, Bill Klaber, who has all this tape and is an RFK lifelong conspiracy theorist. And then starting in episode 2, boom, they just make Bill Klaber a co-host on the podcast. And I thought this is either super brilliant and efficient or absolutely bananas. I'm not sure which side I lean on still.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused by the whole structure of the entire podcast, because I was like, wait a minute. So we went to see this guy, the guy who looks like the guy from Law and Order, and that was interesting. And then all of a sudden,
Sam Waterston,
yeah, I like Sam Waterston. And then boom, like you said, all of a sudden in the next episode, he's there now as co-host, and I just felt like overall for me, like the narrative just seemed to kind of jump around. I guess I would have, if there was more of a sort of heads up, like, and now he's going to help me investigate in this podcast in a sort of a different way. But it felt like to me, it's like they've got all this great tape and they're trying to figure out how to use all this tape. But in doing that, for me, I feel like the narrative sort of flow is broken up quite a bit, because we have some sort of random things in the middle, and then we have this random woman in Texas, which they admitted wasn't really related.
One off, yeah.
But they had some good tape on her. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I guess it remains to be seen, but that was like the best line. So one of the best lines so far was like, and then he took a hard right on Conspiracy Street. Yep.
He did.
I have been there. Yeah,
he did. And I have to say, I at this point in the show, now we're not halfway through yet, I kind of lean toward it being a good choice just to give him the mic, because we could just listen to Zach interview him and hear him say what he would say anyway, or we could listen to him say it. And I just kind of think he has so much. Like, why not just pass in the mic? I think in a different situation where it was a conspiracy theorist, it was like about Pizzagate or something, it might be a little bit different, like without the historical documentation. I don't know, Kevin, what do you think of that choice?
Okay, now, first of all, Bill is the one who, at the beginning of all the episodes, is trying to figure out stamps.com because they're going to cancel his car insurance. Right?
Yeah, he's a little bit clueless, okay. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's an unusual choice. Yeah, because it does feel a little bit like you're giving up your objectivity as a podcast producer by giving over the microphone to one of the subjects and not providing like greater context. Like, I completely missed that's who that was.
Yeah.
I mean, because we hear him in the ads and like, if you saw him on TV, you might recognize all of a sudden that his role has changed. But I just did not expect that he would suddenly be the partner. I mean,
right.
One way of doing that, if you want to bring him in, is you could do it very much, I'd say, like Radiolab style, where it's two people and Zach is asking him, and the rest of sort of the reporting and all the archival audio is sort of playing around them, and you can tell very much the same kind of story, but it provides the context that Bill is not talking to us directly. Bill is talking to the interviewer,
right?
And so there's that filter there,
right? This is efficient. It's efficient.
Yeah,
you have to admit.
But I will say, in all honesty,
he's good at
what the story's telling. He's doing it very well.
I think he's been telling the story for a long time.
Yeah, and then the way it mixes in, and then Vietnam happened, and
well, that's a specific thing I want to talk about Bill, is that I think they have to weave a bunch of history into this podcast. You know, I think about the history they weave in around Allard Lowenstein having been a congressman, sort of all the politics around Johnson and like the Democratic race for president. They have to work in all the Vietnam stuff. They have to work in like the whole Middle East stuff in the podcast. And they have to do that like very quickly because that's not what the show's about. How do you feel about the way American history is woven into this narrative? Do you think it's done economically and well? Or do you think that it's being given the short shrift because it's so economical?
You know, I guess my feeling is that they're telling you just enough so that you have some context to what they're talking about. But, you know, I think if you don't come in with some knowledge of that stuff, I think it would be, you know, pretty confusing, or at least the impression that you get is so sort of generalized and just sort of not complex at all, you know, especially with Vietnam. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, I think they're in a tough situation because you are talking about, like, especially if the idea is, well, they had to get rid of Bobby Kennedy and why, or, you know, Sirhan, he has this particular supposed beef with Bobby Kennedy. You could spend a lot of time on that to really explain it. Like, if I was doing this podcast, I think I would fall into the trap of, well, I really got to explain this so that people really understand, like, what was going on then. And then it'd be this boring, like, 15 minutes of what the deal was with Vietnam at that point in time. So, it's a tough situation because of part of the argument, like sort of almost a tangential part of the argument they're trying to make. So, you know, I don't think they do it really well, but I don't think it's critical for what they're trying to do it well. I think they're just trying to be like, okay, this is basically the deal. Let's get on with the conspiracy.
Right. And we have a leading sort of character around the conspiracy for the first few episodes, Allard Lowenstein. He's a former congressman, encouraged RFK to run for president. He becomes the central figure in the reexamination of the RFK assassination. You know, we hear about his tripwire for thinking that there could have been a plot being the release of Nixon's hit list and realizing that he was on it, this like obscure former congressman. And then it's sort of, what is his cosmology shaken, whatever that means. I like literally have no idea what that word means. But he actually gets quite far. He actually is on mainstream TV shows. We hear him with William F. Buckley on PBS. We hear him doing press conferences. We hear him actually engaging with law enforcement, bringing this conspiracy theory to the mainstream in a big way. Lara, what did you think of this character, Allard Lowenstein?
You know, we were listening to this. Ken and I were listening to this, and when he first started with his, trip down Conspiracy Street here, Ken's like, oh, this guy's just got total PTSD, and he's not thinking clearly because he saw Bobby Kennedy when he was getting wheeled in the morgue. And, you know, that may have played a role, I think, in some of his mental state. I mean, that was obviously probably pretty traumatic to have seen this in the news, flown out, and then actually been there when they were wheeling him into the autopsy room.
Waiting for the phone call from him and then finding out he'd been assassinated, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's a pretty traumatic situation to be put into. The thing that lends him some credibility, I think, is that the Kennedy family continued to embrace him. And when he was killed, I think, didn't Ted Kennedy speak at his funeral?
Yes.
So I think if he was a real wingnut that didn't, that really was just spouting off and people thought he was full of shit, I don't necessarily know if the family would have continued to embrace him in that manner. So that was interesting. But it's like every time they said his name, and I don't know if this is just me, but all I could think of was like, remember that Prince of Tides movie?
Yes.
And the guy's
book.
Driving over the bridge, and he's like, Lowenstein, Lowenstein, Lowenstein. I'm like, oh, fucking Lowenstein.
Played by Barbara Streisand in the movie.
Yes. So it was really interesting to hear how this guy kind of took hold of this and carried on with it. And it was I kind of wondered what would have happened had he not been killed.
So, Kevin, what do you think of Lowenstein as a character in this podcast?
I thought it was really interesting. It was great that they had a lot of tape of him so you could hear his point of view, and he was so closely tied to the people involved, as opposed to a lot of the conspiracy theorists or people that have really no personal connection. So he was good, and then obviously, you're thinking, if you don't know the history, you're like, oh, well, he must be dead now because they don't have an interview with him. They're relying on all this great tape. And then to find out the way that he died, where he was shot in his office by a former staffer, and how they also make that feel a little,
Do you think that's a little or do you think it's just
no?
Like
I don't think it's a little No, I mean, I don't think everything has to do with robot killers.
Right. Well, it is true that this is a guy who demonstrates that he was willing to go out on a limb for things. He was willing to be provocative. He was willing to kind of be, in the front with stuff. And you can imagine how over time there might be people in his life who he could have rubbed the wrong way, or maybe I don't know. Toby, what do you think of that idea that Lowenstein was killed because he was investigating RFK's assassination?
I think that has absolutely zero credibility.
Surprise.
Well, I don't know the first thing about Allard Lowenstein beyond what I've heard here, but there's a zillion reasons why a former estranged staffer might have resentments or whatever. It's rational or not. And the idea that it's somehow connected to this one thing that he's doing, regardless of their past history and stuff like that, just doesn't seem realistic to me. The thing I kind of came away with thinking about was, if you take Lowenstein's position, or the position I think of a lot of people, this idea that in one family you could have these two seemingly potentially transformative leaders in this one family, and both of them get murdered by sort of random lone guys with guns. Mm-hmm. I think it's hard to digest that kind of just two lone guys can do that and change history in that way. So it doesn't surprise me that people who are close to it would look at it and be like, this just cannot be just random fate,
right?
There's got to be something behind it. So it doesn't surprise me that people embrace conspiracies on both ends of it.
So, Toby, can I ask you a more specific question about it, though?
Sure.
What do you think of the conspiracy idea that Sirhan was some sort of Manchurian candidate robot killer?
So it makes total sense in the context of 1969 or whatever. In that is the kind of you have the Manchurian candidate, which is relatively recent in memory, and so that does seem like a possibility, but I don't know, I'm not an expert in the science of this stuff, but you sure as hell don't hear about the potential of sending hypnotically triggered murderers into the U.S. to kill people. I think that has been shown to be not necessarily all that realistic. So it seems to me like a relic of the time.
Yeah. So you say it makes sense. You mean it makes sense in 1969 for people to believe that because
exactly. Yeah. I should have been more clear. Yeah, but you're exactly right. I think in 1969,
I just loved hearing Toby saying that makes sense. That was amazing.
Cutting edge. It's like the cutting edge, the cutting edge assassination method.
Yeah.
But I don't think it holds water now.
Sort of like how in the 1950s, all the photos of UFOs, the alleged photos, all look like toasters and irons from the 1950s.
Oh. So, Toby, when you were talking about how, you were talking the two members of this family were killed. I mean, I think one of the things that always, when Rebecca was asking, are you familiar with this conspiracy theory about RFK? I think there's just this sort of overall, and this mystique about the Kennedy family in general with, JFK's assassination and the conspiracy theories around that. And, and then there's that whole weird thing about the curse that was put on the family or something. Do you guys know about this?
There is called a Kennedy family curse. I don't think it was.
That was put on. No, they're supposed, I think, by some Native American tribe or something.
That part I didn't hear.
Okay, so there's a lot of very interesting. So when you hear about family members dying,
that sounds bananas.
How many more conspiracies around this family could there be?
No, Ken told me this, and he's a big history buff, and he told me this. He's like, oh yeah, there's that thing about the Native American people that put the curse on them or something.
That explains everything.
Yeah, there we go.
It totally does.
Toby's rolling over in his future grave right now.
But there's always appealing about hearing more about this family because there's so many, and then did you guys watch that? I think it was like a made-for-TV movie a while ago about Bobby and Jackie having an affair after JFK got killed. And now there's a new, if you need to expand like I did, because I was like, wait, what's happening? There's like a new 4-part series on Netflix that just dropped like within the last week or two as well.
Right. It goes to sort of, the whole thing about the Kennedy mystique. And even though this is a generation before us, the four of us, it still resonates with those of us who follow history and political science and the news and whatnot. The thing is that, we had a political figure who rose to the top. It was in Jack Kennedy, who was young and was handsome and had a beautiful wife and a young family in the White House, and was sort of this TV made president, which is the kind of thing when people were young and they all wanted to aspire to something. This was sort of like the picture perfect representation. Now, in real life, it wasn't all so pretty, but it was
also potentially politically transformative, which was threatening to a lot of people.
Well, I was going to say that when after John Kennedy was killed, and then later with Bobby Kennedy, a lot of people trying to find a reason why could that be, and it isn't. And it has to be more than just there was this lone assassin. There has to be some other bigger reason behind it, because I just can't accept that's the answer, that this is why our dream is shattered. And I think that's the kind of thing that fuels these kind of conspiracies. And you see it with modern day politicians and about the things that they have done or the reasons that they've lost power and things that all these other people are conspiring against them, whether it's the deep state or the media or the vast left, right wing, middle rings, it's all these different things. And I think we strive to find a reason for this kind of stuff, which is I think why certainly by now 2018 we've seen a lot of this already. We're battle worn on a lot of these kinds of things, but 1960s, early 60s, our country really hadn't been through that kind of thing. And so it was new, and I think that's why it fuels people's interest in, maybe there's something more than just this one person that took away this important person. We got to hold somebody else responsible.
Let's face it, too, there was a lot of, and let's be real, shady shit going on in the government before, during, and after this period in time. There was the Vietnam War, there were the Pentagon Papers, there was the Watergate. There was just like this era of like a decade and a half of real things that happened that fueled a mistrust in authority and government, and that made these things more believable because unbelievable things did happen in real life. I think that's kind of what all this comes from. That being said, I will just go back to something Toby said at the very beginning of this. I am surprised to hear in this podcast how mainstream I feel like listening to the people talk about this Robert F. Kennedy assassination stuff, even though it was a very small room, which a lot of people were present. It seems more like a mainstream conspiracy than even the JFK assassination conspiracy stuff. When you actually hear that
what do you mean by mainstream? I don't think you're using that term correctly.
When I hear that people who are the leading people behind the conspiracy were doing press conferences and actually getting law enforcement to answer questions, and the investigation was reopened, and there was all of this stuff about like missing evidence, and it seems more like it was legitimized a little bit more than the JFK stuff was. And I don't know if it was in reaction to the JFK stuff not being legitimized. I'm not sure why, but that surprised me.
I think it also, it happened in LA, and I don't think, the LA Police Department, going back that far, I think had a pretty dubious reputation as well.
What?
So I think that, I don't think that helped matters.
Yeah. Right.
That they're like burning pieces of evidence and...
You don't destroy evidence, Toby. You don't do that.
Ever.
Yeah. It's just, waiters bumped into it with a tray and put a hole in it the size of a bullet hole.
It moved my cosmology. I didn't know what to do. All right. Well, let's just leave it there and let our audience know. Do we think this podcast is worth listening to? Lara Bricker, I would love to hear your take on whether or not you find the RFK tapes compelling. Should our audience listen to it? Thumbs up or thumbs down? What do you think, Lara Bricker?
This is when I wish we went back to like our number or our letter grading system. So I will say yes. I mean, I'm not like totally enamored with it. It's interesting. I do feel like it kind of wanders around a bit, and I'm a little confused in terms of where the narrative is going, because like we had this guy that was the interview subject, now he's part of it, and there's some sort of tangents that happen in terms of like episodes, special episodes that aren't totally related, but they're all interesting. So if you want to listen to some really interesting tape from that time period, my absolute favorite part is, and this is horrible, there's like this newscaster who like takes charge of the whole situation, and he's like, get him, grab him, and I'm like,
get the gun, Rosie.
I'm like, oh my God, like who's this guy? Like he was like all over it. He's like, get him down, take him down. It was great. So it's interesting listening to the tapes from that time period. If I had to listen to this a couple times because it's not something that you can be like doing something else and listening to, because there's a lot of detail.
So Lara, is that a thumbs up or thumbs down?
That's a thumbs up. In the old days, it would be a thumbs sideways.
Got it. Toby, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for the RFK tapes, and why?
I'll give it a thumbs up. I like this conspiracy stuff, even though I don't like really believe in it. But I think it's interesting to hear how people put this stuff together and the way people's minds work about making linkages and stuff. So I think I don't take the conclusions particularly seriously, but I think it's interesting to hear how people come around to these alternate explanations. So for that reason, thumbs up. I'll keep listening.
Yeah, I'm going to give it a mild thumbs up as well for exactly the same reasons Toby cites. I don't know where the podcast is going. I don't know if they're trying to make a compelling case that there was a conspiracy there, in which case my thumb may turn downward a little bit, or if we're just examining the phenomenon of the conspiracy theory. If the latter is the case, I actually kind of, the more I think about it, even in real time in this podcast, kind of love it that Zach Stewart Pontier handed the mic over to the leading conspiracy theorist. It's a very efficient and creative way to tell this story that some people may see as very fringe, and just open the tent and bring the person with all the material in. I don't know. I'm learning a little bit. I actually feel like the RFK assassination, we weren't alive then, Kevin, and I know that it's not true for people who were alive then, but for us, it's overshadowed by the JFK assassination and the Martin Luther King assassination. The RFK assassination it's a story that we haven't heard as much about. So I'm enjoying those aspects of the show. And the historic tape is just freaking great. So for those reasons, I'm going to give it a marginal thumbs up. Kevin, what about you? I'm
also a thumbs up, and I think the modifier on all of our reviews is moderate, right? I mean, these aren't like thumbs way up. I'm not buying the conspiracy story at all. Every time they come up with some kind of amazing thing, I'm like, cool. But I think the story is interesting in the way they're telling it, and certainly Crimetown has a very pretty much a Crimetown kind of feel. It kind of pulls a little bit from that sort of masculine style. I think we were talking about the other day about Crimetown, what set it apart. It had sort of a bit of an attitude. A testosterone-fueled podcast. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. I don't know if the RFK tapes are the best representation of the life and times of Robert Kennedy. If you want, instead of the RFK tapes, maybe you want to listen to a good RFK audiobook, and that's why you should go to Audible.
Oh, snap, you should.
And maybe listen to something like Bobby Kennedy, A Raging Spirit by Chris Matthews, read by the author.
Perhaps you can.
You're doing that? Is that what you're saying?
No, perhaps you can. I mean, you can listen to another thing, too, which I may have ideas about.
What's that?
I would highly recommend the new book by my new favorite writer, Anthony Horowitz, The Word is Murder. This is the same guy who wrote Magpie Murders. I've talked about it on the show before. Yeah. This is a brilliant mystery writer who's written in a ton of genres, including TV and film and other books. He's written Midsummer Murders. He's written James Bond books.
Rebecca, you've hijacked my ad.
I'm sorry. You got to read The Word is Murder. Listen to it on Audible. It's freaking great.
Yeah, and now until July 31st, Amazon Prime members can get Audible for $4.95 a month for the first 3 months. Remember, you get a credit for any audiobook in the store every month. So I got a credit. I got to use it. But they do roll over, right?
They roll over, but I never roll any over. I use them all. I buy more. I use them all.
Well, it's good because if you don't like the one you pick, you can exchange it with no hassle. Plus, your audiobooks are yours to keep forever. Even if you cancel, you keep them with you. Go to audible.com/crime or text the word crime to 500-500 to get started. That's Audible, AUDIBLE.com/crime.
Crime.
or text crime to 500-500. Amazon Prime members can get Audible for $4.95 a month for the first 3 months. That's like getting 3 months for the price of one. After that, it's only $14.95 a month. This offer ends July 31st, 2018.
What else you got, Kevin?
Well, it's so hot this summer. It was super heat wave here in the Northeast.
You are literally wearing your underwear in our studio right now.
Yeah, it's true. So what is the best way to get refreshed during the summer?
Tell me.
It's got to be a smoothie from Daily Harvest.
That's a good choice. Excellent choice.
Yeah, remember, Daily Harvest is a subscription service that makes eating healthy easy with delicious plant-based foods that are ready in as little as 30 seconds. Daily Harvest delivers perfectly portioned cups of frozen organic fruits and vegetables directly to your door. All you have to do is add water or your favorite milk to the cup and blend it, heat or soak it. It's basically all the effort you have to do. It's a perfect thing to have on hand for those days when you don't have time to cook. Laura, you're a big fan, right?
I am. I just re-upped my Daily Harvest for the summer because I was, I would just wanted something easy during the day when I'm working and I'm like, I don't have time to cook. I don't feel like cooking. It's super hot.
Do you bring it with you to work?
Well, I work at home most of the time. So, yes. In fact, I do.
She brings it from the kitchen to the dining room.
Oh, but sometimes you're out on the road. I just didn't know.
I am out on the road. So I just got like some strawberry peach smoothies. They have some apple and green smoothies. So some of these are, kind of lighter for summertime, but they all have these like all sorts of super healthy ingredients. And then they'll have this like what I call the wild card ingredient thrown in, which is something super healthy that I've never heard of. When I look it up, I'm like, I should totally be eating that. Thank you.
And now you are.
And now I am.
You can go to daily-harvest.com and enter promo code CRIME to get 3 cups free in your first box. That's promo code CRIME for 3 free Daily Harvest cups at daily-harvest.com. That's daily-harvest.com.
All right. Well, now we're going to talk about the final 2 episodes of the excellent podcast In the Dark Season 2, which means, Kevin, it is time for you to read this.
The Richter Scale.
Of course, we have named our reviews and continuing coverage of In the Dark Season 2 the Richter Scale because Lara Bricker has some sort of medical event every time she listens to this podcast. Rage-induced comas, seizures, heart attacks, strokes. So yes.
Something. So this week it's required me to have a bowl of chocolate chips and wine.
Yes. And so what is that called, Kevin?
The Richter Scale.
Chocolate chips and wine edition. All right. So we are on a bi-weekly schedule now, which means we have 2 episodes of In the Dark Season 2 to talk about, the final 2 episodes of this season. I want to start with episode 10. This episode was called Discovery. This was an episode in which Madeline Barron outlines that prosecutors have always said, as part of their case, that Curtis Flowers was the only suspect in the Tardy furniture investigation. But Madeline found a little document in the file saying that another man had been questioned just days after the murders.
And there were no notes from this interview, no transcripts, no reports, nothing. Just this one piece of paper. Right when I saw it, I knew it could be important. I made a copy of it, and I wrote on it, "Who is this person?" and circled my question in pink highlighter. I would end up spending a year trying to find this person, trying to understand what this one piece of paper meant.
Okay, so this episode about discovery, it kind of starts with an example, which I think is a brilliant thing for Madeline to do. Instead of going straight into this whole discovery thing, Curtis Flowers, she sets up a pattern that Doug Evans' office perpetuated around discovery by telling us about this, what I like to classify as a bananas rape case. Bobby Joan Townsend was the defendant's name. He was tried for rape based on a single witness, not only with no evidence, but actual exculpatory evidence that the prosecutor, aka Doug Evans' office, knew about and didn't disclose in trial. Kevin, what do you think of this rape case that we hear about in the podcast and sort of the consequences to a real person who was later had his conviction overturned and then found not guilty because of Doug Evans' prosecutorial misconduct and not disclosing evidence?
Well, I mean, if we needed a reason to think that Doug Evans would repeat a prosecutorial error in multiple cases. I mean, I think we probably, I don't think any of us are surprised about that at this point. But it was quite striking to find, again, there's so many examples that are just like on point about, here's some evidence. I mean, this so clearly
blatant. I think it's the word you're looking for.
I mean, even if you're the prosecutor and you don't think that in your mind proves that this isn't the guy, because sometimes the stuff is like, that evidence shouldn't be used, but this guy actually still did it, and you can get a conviction or whatever. But just to say, like, no, not only that, but I'm not even going to give it to the defense,
right? Or to lie in court about saying that the lab never got back to me, when in fact the lab had gotten back to them and told them.
Yeah. And this ties also into the final episode too, when we get about the gun, that it just seems like they made their bed and they're going to lie in it. They're like, they're all in on Curtis Flowers to whatever extent they could to get evidence that they thought they could present at court, and then to defend that shaky evidence by any means. I mean, I just feel like Madeline Barron and her team is just sort of torn apart every shred of duplicity that this prosecutor has committed.
So, Toby, we hear Madeline say in this episode, and a theme that you've touched on before in our discussing of the season of In the Dark, there has been no punishment to Doug Evans or the prosecutors in his office for blatant prosecutorial misconduct, including Brady violations. Not just the kind of Brady violations that could make a jury potentially change their conversation, but in the case like we heard of this rape defendant, Bobby Joe Townsend, a Brady violation that actually shows that he did not do the crime, that perhaps no crime had been committed at all, and yet there's no consequences. What do you think of a system in which there are no consequences for prosecutors who are pursuing these cases, and perhaps people in prison or in death row, and there's just never any punishment? What do you think about that?
I think it's awesome for him.
For Doug Evans?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what more I can say about it, other than, especially if you're going after a capital case, the idea that you could, and in his case, repeatedly be caught, basically trying to set him up, trying to fix the trial, and the idea that what you're trying to do is murder somebody who, I mean, he's got to know that there's a hell of a lot of doubt at this point. I don't know. I mean, is there not, like, I guess I just don't know enough about it, but is like the Bar Association not have any kind of, recourse against state's attorneys? I don't understand.
I think they have to have like where we are, they'd have to have like a formal complaint to what we have is like a professional conduct committee, and then they'd have hearings, and so has nobody made a complaint to that, jurisdiction? I don't know.
It seems insane if nobody has, quite honestly. Although I think, I think the other thing, and maybe we're getting ahead of the conversation a little bit, but I do think the chilling effect of a lot of this is innocence is not a protection there, right? If the DA wants you in prison, or even wants you executed, he can take the steps necessary to have that done. So, whether he's doing that to get after his enemies, I don't think there's any evidence of that. But I think that has to be in your mind, is that it's not hard to get innocent people put away in prison, apparently. So whether that would keep you from wanting to speak out, especially if you're African American in that district, I would imagine that's something of a factor.
Well, there are so many details in this episode, which basically actually circles around the search for this alternate suspect. Madeline says there was one little booking document in the file with no police reports around it, around Willie Hemphill, whose name we hear how many times in the podcast, Kevin?
About 57.
His name was Willie James Hemphill. I wanted to know what was going on with Willie James Hemphill, about Willie James Hemphill, to Willie James Hemphill, for Willie James Hemphill, 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 and I searched for anyone with the name Willie James Hemphill. This Willie James Hemphill, another Willie James Hemphill, a man named Willie James Hemphill, the right Willie James Hemphill.
It's a lot of Hemphills. There's so many, they don't all fit in one page.
What's the last name?
Sure, it's Hemphill.
First name.
Willie?
Yes.
I think Madeline got paid for the Hemphill.
I have to say, like, if there were a drinking game that would be, like, destined to kill people, it would be drink every time someone says the name Willie Hemphill in this podcast.
It's like the John Smith of Mississippi.
It's like Charlie Brown. It's like you got to say the whole name.
Well, I have said this before. There is complete democracy in this podcast. Madeline Barron uses first name, last name for everybody all the time, except for people who work on the podcast. It's our reporter, Parker.
Yeah.
But it's Willie Hemphill, and it's Curtis Flowers, and it's Doug Evans. I love that. I love that little style detail.
But he wasn't the only Willie Hemphill.
There were 10 million of them, and they were...
It wasn't John Smith. It was... It's just, if your name's Hemphill, you only got one choice?
That was a crazy amount of work.
Yeah, Willie James Hemphill. So
Willie James Hemphill.
Lara, we hear that there's supposed to be more in the file. Just briefly, as a defense investigator, can you just explain like what police reports are supposed to look like? And so, like what was missing that Madeline was trying to explain to us? Like what's missing here?
The narratives from the police. So what I would, so like just dreaming up what I would have expected to see based on what I've now heard Madeline report, is we would have like a police report where like police officer says, I came to my attention that Willie Hemphill, blah, 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 may have the Fila size 9-10 shoes and was in the area and such person reported seeing him. Next person. Then you would have perhaps some narrative from the people that saw him in terms of what they saw. Then you would have a narrative about, based on this information, the police went to such and such address at such and such a time, and we located him, and, you know, they had their big, you know, crazy response that he talked about. And then the thing that's really missing is they interviewed him. They questioned him. They recorded him. Yep. Where the fuck is that? I mean, I just was like, I mean, so...
And then he was in jail for 11 days.
So much. And that's not uncommon. So what they do, I mean, this happens a lot. You have a case where somebody is a suspect. A lot of times, unfortunately, that person has had prior dealings with the law and they may have some sort of an old warrant. So the police use the old warrant to hold the person while they're investigating so they know where the person is. So that didn't surprise me. But the fact that there was nothing but the booking sheet,
right,
when clearly there had been like a whole side investigation, was ridiculous.
Right. And it's almost like it was a mistake on their part to leave the booking sheet in if they wanted to cover up this whole thing, right?
Yeah. I was just like, how is there no information? And you know, sometimes depending on the police department, you might see, you know, even just attached to this police report, like they would have run the guy's record and that would have been in there. So I could not, this podcast, every time I think it has reached a new point where I'm like, the holy shit factor, like I can't believe this just happened, it just gets worse. And that was pretty bad.
So Kevin, they get a tip, this reporting team gets a tip from a court clerk. By the way, high five to court clerks everywhere. You and I have been helped out by court clerks many times,
yep,
right?
Yep.
Court clerk gives them a tip that all the files in this case or other files they might be interested in are stored in a decrepit, moldering factory that they have to go to and wear masks. And literally mice have eaten the stuff. No one's watching it. They can just walk in and as reporters, thumb through a bunch of cabinets and files and find booking cards and records. Thoughts about Mississippi's filing system?
Man, they store stuff in the weirdest places. You know, all abandoned factories, abandoned jails.
Yep.
I just, you know, I'm surprised. I just, you know, thought there'd be a better archival records retention system.
I think that one of the best uses of sound in this whole podcast so far was some of the things they discovered there, including a very detailed record of a candy theft.
Yeah, that's funny.
Oh my God, that was hysterical.
And you can just tell, like, these reporters, they've seen some shit. And like this was such a relief to be able to like read this and like sort of laugh through it is wonderful. But before we move on, let's just talk about Willie Hemphill himself. They finally track him down after talking to like 74 other Willie Hemphills. We hear about his very violent criminal record. They actually have a chance to interview him in person, and we hear him on tape. And it was interesting to me to hear his voice after hearing about all the horrible crimes he'd been accused of. But the first thing he says is, I was a suspect in these murders. Mm-hmm. I was a suspect.
Well, it's interesting that he admits that he was a suspect. I mean, I know that seems like if he actually did it, he might not say, hey, yeah, they thought I was a suspect. But he seemed like that part was amazing. You know what's amazing? This whole thing where she's like, so they go to Indianapolis. They're trying to find him. He's in the court system. And then they sit down in court and he's like sitting next to them. I'm like, are you even kidding me? I mean, she's definitely got sort of that reporter luck following her around in terms of being in the right place at the right time. But the fact that he was so willing to talk about it, either he's really stupid and doesn't think he's ever going to get caught, or he had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, that was my feeling too, because he was talking about he turned himself in. He was a suspect. He was this. I was thinking like, oh, this guy probably looked great for this, but there's no way that he actually did it. He's talking about the investigation. He's not talking about trying to evade it. He never at one point said to Madeline, even though, by the way, we know he did all these other horrible, violent crimes, he never said, well, they looked at me, but I wasn't the guy. He never said that. He just said they looked at me, which to me says that he could have equally been railroaded by Doug Evans at the same time. Now, Kevin, before we move on to the finale, can you please read this for me real quick?
True Crime Podcast Update.
Now, last Thursday, June 28th, Flowers' attorneys added to their original appeal motion, arguing because of this podcast that stunning new evidence has come to light. They actually cite episode 10, saying that in 1996, the state interviewed, arrested, and held an alternative suspect in the Tardy murders, William James Hemphill. Flowers' attorneys cite episode 10 of In the Dark. They actually cite the podcast in this document that, Flowers' guilt was withheld, that evidence pointing away from Flowers' guilt was withheld from the defense, specifically mentioning that Hemphill was booked into jail in Winona wearing Fila Grant Hill shoes and was held for 11 days. We've heard Madeline's reporting on this. The reporting, can we just all agree, is making a difference in this case?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's amazing. It's going to be really interesting to see if they end up on the witness list or if they try to subpoena their tape.
I think that'll be interesting as well. Now, let's talk about the finale, shall we? Episode 11, The End. In this episode, we hear a whole alternative theory of the root of the crime. We hear from somebody who finds a gun under his mother's house, or his dog found a gun, and we finally hear what the deal was with that one-eyed Willie tunnel tape.
And this tunnel, it led under the train tracks. We stood at the end of the tunnel and peered inside. I'm just curious to take a look at this. Don't fall.
All right, so there was a gun that was found, that was turned into the cops. One cop denies that it ever happened, and then other cops, say that it happened. And then, by the way, the guy who found the gun also shows Madeline Barron in person a tunnel that could have easily been an alternative route to escape from this crime. Kevin, thoughts on this entire sort of like slap in the face end of the narrative of this podcast?
I kind of like given up, like trying to guess or trying to, keep an open mind to refute the things that are being put out there. Like, maybe that.
Why is your instinct to do that? I'm just curious. Like, why is your instinct to always be like, well, maybe this probably isn't that?
This is an excellent podcast. I think that unlike other ones, it deserves and can withstand a higher level of scrutiny. Okay, and there have been times when I'll just say my critique of this entire series would be there are times that Madeline's reporting verges on advocacy and not journalism. Sometimes I thought it veered a little bit towards we're going to tell you this as opposed to tell you what the story is. And I'm also, we've done these things and sort of things happen and like, is X a big deal? I mean, or is it an honest mistake? Is it something that like doesn't really fit with the rest of the narrative? Is it possible that, something could have... Every time that I come and I think of something like that, I just sort of like all of a sudden get boom, boom, boom. And, Madeline just kind of ties it all together. She shows it. She brings around, you figure out why why are we talking about how violent Cookie is? And like, I don't get this. Boom, at the end. Okay, I get it now.
Because he killed 3 people.
Yeah, so that's
why. Are we talking about the ballistic stuff? Because the ballistics expert even says, I look at it with my eyes and just make a judgment call. Like, there are reasons why they are doing everything. And here they found a person who had a story where, like, the gun, he turned it into he did the right thing.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent story. And it's, it could be the murder weapon. We don't know. Maybe it is.
Of course we don't know.
But it's certainly worth, it probably should have been in the file.
Do the cops know?
They don't know because...
They know.
No, well, does somebody who received that gun think that this gun should not be tested for some reason? Then, yeah, because that one officer said, I turned it into the DA's office so that it could get to the crime lab, and the crime lab says it never came here. So we know where it went.
Lara, thoughts about first we hear from the one cop who says it never happened, and then we hear from the cop who says...
Definitely
I was the one who pulled the guy over, and he's the one who told me about the gun, and then we went and got the gun.
Yeah, no. I was listening to the cop, the retired cop, and when she's setting it up, and she's like, and he's retired now. I'm like, oh, then he's totally going to tell the truth. And then he's like, nope, never happened. Nope, that guy's got mental problems. I'm like, oh, this guy is in the Doug Evans camp. And I was like, so discouraging. But then I really loved that the cops that she talked to, the captain and the police chief, were like, really straight up, like, we remember that. Yeah, we got the gun. Yeah, this is where it went. Oh, you should talk to this person. John Johnson, the Christmas tree king. I don't think I ever told you that, but there was a guy in my town, John Johnson, the Christmas tree king. So every time. So I appreciated how forthcoming the cops in the small town were, and they were honest about it.
Some of the cops.
So in that particular situation, they were like, they acknowledged that this gun was there, that it went here, that it would have gone to the crime lab. I think that, who knows, that gun's in the bottom of a landfill somewhere, if you ask me. But you know what? These people are so arrogant. It could be like sitting in like Doug Evans' office, and he's just so arrogant about his position and the fact that nobody is ever going to call him out that he never even got the damn thing tested. Or I don't know. That part was ridiculous, but I loved, oh my gosh, if you haven't seen it yet, you really need to go on their website. And they've also tweeted out the link to their video tour, and they call it a tunnel, but I'm going to call it a culvert because that's really what it's like, a big culvert pipe filled with water underneath the railroad tracks. And this guy who's so earnest giving his tour of where the gun was found under the house and through the tunnel over to the Tardy Furniture. Just incredible footage. And I love the fact that the people in this town came to trust this team to the point that they did.
Yeah, the digital game of this podcast team, as a professional digital producer for a audio company, digital game for this podcast team is on point. It's incredibly on point. Toby, in the middle of this episode, Madeline Barron does what I think is basically a very effective closing argument about Doug Evans, which is the second character in this podcast, which, as she has framed, has spent 20 years trying to kill Curtis Flowers.
For nearly 22 years, over 6 trials, the case against Curtis Flowers has been prosecuted by one man, a prosecutor who told the court that he never had any evidence that pointed at anyone other than Curtis Flowers, even though there was another suspect, Willie James Hemphill, a man who'd been held in jail for 11 days. A prosecutor who violated the U.S. Constitution when he struck black people from the jury. A prosecutor who put witnesses on the stand who were clearly not credible. Witnesses who'd given implausible statements months after the murders. A prosecutor who relied on the work of an investigator who didn't keep detailed notes. And a ballistics analyst who testified that he could be 100% certain of his conclusions, even when the science didn't support that. A prosecutor who used testimony from 3 jailhouse informants, all of whom have since said that they lied under oath. and have said they got deals. Deals that Evans claimed didn't exist, including the state's star witness, Odell Cookie Hallman, a violent criminal who was treated with leniency, only to go on to kill 3 people. And this prosecutor, the elected district attorney, Doug Evans, has done all of this in plain sight in a death penalty case, and he's never gotten in trouble for any of it.
Toby, when Madeline drops a closing argument like that, stringing together all the things she discussed in the podcast, like, can you imagine? I mean, I know how you feel. I know how like Kevin feels and how Lara feels and I feel about this guy and this case. Is it hard for you to imagine that somebody like in the Doug Evans camp, like, what do you think they would think listening to this? Would that get through? Or do you think this is just so entrenched that like even that kind of cohesive, reporting-based, fact-based narrative closing argument, like what do you think? Is this effective for us? Is it effective for people who perhaps are on the other side? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I do think there's a natural sort of disinclination to believe like outsiders, particularly from the North, coming in and like sort of telling people like it is. Like I think it's, you know, it's that way a lot of places. Certainly that way in New Hampshire, but I think particularly in the South and particularly with Northerners coming in, and particularly when race is involved. I mean, I think there's, you know, on the part of some people, sort of a resistance and a sort of, well, of course they're going to come up with something, but they don't get it.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if people who had that mindset listen to this and be like, yeah, you know what? If I spend a year in somebody's town, I could dig up a lot of shit about them too. And just if I just want to tell one side of an argument, you know, I think that would be the response. But you hear that, you know, that little brief moment when they interview that cop Vince, who's like, didn't happen, you know, like that dude's not listening to this and
he's
being
a dick.
like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't believe that I've been on the wrong side all this time.
Right.
No, it's like these fucking, you know, people come down from Minnesota or wherever, and they're telling us how to do our business, and they can fuck right off. They'll be gone and we'll still be here.
Yeah.
So they think.
Yeah. So, Kevin, I wanted to ask you a style question.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed a change in style in this final episode, the end, where there was suddenly a very Westworld-like scoring, where all of the In the Dark theme music was suddenly played on a piano, which sounded very different to me. Did you notice that at all, or was that just
No.
me?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you about something else that Madeline does that she doesn't do in any other episode. She follows Curtis's parents to their prison visit, which of course doesn't happen because the prison's on lockdown. But then she does something that she never does in any other episode, which is she imagines something that hasn't happened yet. She doesn't use, fact-based digging up. She just sort of tells us what will happen if Curtis Flowers' appeals don't work. She describes Curtis Flowers' potential execution to us. What did you think of that section of the episode?
I thought it was very good. It made me. I suppose that the whole trip in the car for her was just to set that up, just to set up that scene that they'll come one more time. And if Doug Evans has his way, they're going to go to a different building and watch the execution. And it's sort of the first time they talked about the reality of the end there. That we all know he's on death row, but to kind of lay it out like that in sort of the presence of his loved ones, was powerful.
Lara, the one line that really struck me was when Madeline asked Curtis's parents, "When is the last time you touched your son?"
That was absolutely heartbreaking. As a parent, to hear something like that, and to hear just their dedication, and they went the first and third Tuesday of every month. They might have missed 3 weeks, and then if he was good, I think every 3 months they could go in the same room, but there was a line across the table. I mean, just heartbreaking. The humanity of the situation is it's just too much to listen to something like that. But you know, as discouraged and disheartened as I am by the justice system, to hear that Curtis still has faith and that he's still clipping recipes and watching the cooking channel and sending recipes home to his mom to cook when he gets out is good for him. I mean, I don't know if I could keep that attitude after everything that he's been through.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring back an old school thing we used to do on this podcast a long time ago. I think we've all agreed many times, as we've talked about In the Dark Season 2, I mean, at least 10 times now, because we just talked about episode 10 and 11. We've all agreed it's a thumbs up, a rousing thumbs up. This is a great true crime, justice-oriented, reported podcast. But I want to bring back the grading system. At this point, season 2 is over. So I'd love to hear on a grading system, letter grade, pluses, minuses, the whole thing. What grade would you give In the Dark Season 2 if you were the professor of this course and had to give it a grade? Lara Bricker, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, I always get to start. I am going to go with like A++++++. And this is seriously, in terms of the level of reporting, the level of production, the different types of reporting, the fact that we have resolution to so many questions in the story. And this podcast has just been absolutely amazing. And if she doesn't get some, this team is not recognized journalistically for this, I'm going to be absolutely astounded, because I am waiting to hear that something comes from this, because this has been absolutely just one of the best podcasts we've listened to, probably the best podcast we've listened to. Sometimes we listen to podcasts where they say, and then we're going to look for something, and they don't find shit. And she does, because she goes and finds 30 Willie James hemp pills. So I say super A pluses, really good.
Toby Ball, if you had to give this podcast a letter grade and let our listeners know how you feel, how you would grade it as a professor of podcasts, where do you stand at this point of the semester, at the end of the semester?
Well, I think it comes, and I don't know if it's at the end, but it's somewhere along in a string of what I feel like are really, really strong podcasts that we've listened to, in the past few months, like West Cork and Missing and Murdered Season 2, and I don't know, there's a few others in there. Bikram, I think. But I think this stands above them overall. And I think there's certain things that those other podcasts may have done, like this bit or that bit, that stood out in a way, maybe more than the way that it was done in this podcast. But I think a combination of just like the sheer power of the reporting, and not just that she just went at it from so many different angles. Like her team went at it from so many different angles, including just sort of dogged like shoe leather stuff, but then also the data journalism, recreations. It was pretty comprehensive. So I would give it an A+, and it's probably the best thing that we've listened to as a podcast. And if it's not, I don't know what is, really.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, it's on the Mount Rushmore, certainly.
It is on the Mount Rushmore. I would put it on the Mount Rushmore myself, right next to Serial Season 1, which, by the way, I was on a talk show this week where I got to talk about podcasts, and I had to talk about Serial Season 1 as sort of the granddaddy podcast and pull some clips from it. And I remembered why it was that is the podcast by which we measure all other podcasts, just listening to parts of it again. This podcast is very different. It is not Madeline's story. It is not a first-person narrative exploring a case. It is an in-depth journalistic dive into a very, very important story. This story is emblematic of so many things that are wrong with the American justice system, that are so many things that are wrong with race in America, with inequality in America, and it is just reported so perfectly. There are moments in this podcast, Kevin and I have talked about this, and like in our kitchen, where it's like flaws we hear. They got new information and you can hear where they did new tracking and like edited it in. Or sometimes the music is like a little bit too loud compared to the tracking or whatever. Like little things we hear that we're like, oh, maybe we'd give it like the Russian judge, like a minus 0.1 for that. Fuck that. I'm not giving it minus anything, because what this podcast accomplished isn't just giving the listener a complete story. It's also, dare I say, entertaining. It is, dare I say, compelling. If I weren't listening to it to review, I would listen to it anyway because I'm enjoying the experience of listening to it. It's just damn good. It is a damn good podcast. And I think that if it does not get Curtis Flowers off of death row, it will be the record for what happened to this man. And if it does not win a Peabody and every other damn journalism award offered in America to podcasts, maybe a Pulitzer, I don't know, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah, I've said Pulitzer to several
So
people about
I am,
this.
and like Lara Bricker and like that teacher in The Dream that kid had in A Christmas Story, I am an A+++++++. Kevin, what about you?
There's a better journalist out there than Madeline Barron, but I don't know what her name is.
Oh.
There's a more impactful podcast. I just can't think of what it would be. This is an A+. It's on a level all its own. It's one of the few podcasts that maximizes the medium. It's a story that fills the space and uses all, it needs 6 to 8 hours of being told to fulfill it. It's prepared immaculately. You can't say they didn't do enough work on anything. So it definitely, I agree with Toby, it's on the Mount Rushmore. It deserves to be compared with Serial favorably, but where it veers off from Serial, it's not a mystery journal. Mm-hmm. It's investigative journalism, and it's done extremely well. It's an A+ listen, just like the A+ night sleep I got on my Brooklyn sheets.
That's right.
That's right.
I'm sure Madeline Barron is listening right now, and she's like,
that was so good.
Kevin's review is so moving until he did that ad transition. So tell us about Brooklyn and Sheets, Kevin.
Oh, my goodness. It's summertime, and we're getting this heat wave, and the first thing you want to do is pull off the old sheets and put on the new ones, and we put on the Brooklinen, and
crisp and cool.
Crisp and cool.
Cool is the other side of the pillow.
Well, it doesn't matter. The other side, both sides of the pillow are cool, Rebecca, because they have Brooklinen pillowcases. It's been named the winner of the best online bedding category by Good Housekeeping. Brooklinen is the fastest growing bedding brand in the world, boasting over 20,000 5-star reviews. Don't you think, Rebecca, that this is like hotel quality bedding?
Oh, totally. And one of the things that happened this week, Kevin, I don't know if you saw in our Facebook group, there was a whole discussion about ads on our podcast.
Yeah, Rebecca, what do you really, really like?
What have you actually bought from the podcast? What do you like? All of the listeners that responded, like most of them were like, Brooklyn and Sheets, Brooklyn and Sheets, Brooklyn and Sheets. Everybody loves these sheets just as much as we do. We love these sheets.
Yeah, Brooklinen sheets are the best, most comfortable sheets that we have slept on. Brooklinen.com has an exclusive offer for my listeners. Just my listeners, apparently. Get $20 off and free shipping when you use promo code CWO at Brooklinen.com. Brooklinen is so confident that they offer a risk-free 60-night satisfaction guarantee and a lifetime warranty on all of their sheets and comforters. The only way to get free shipping is to use promo code CWO at Brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com. Promo code CWO. Brooklinen. These are the best sheets ever.
What else you got, Kevin?
Well, okay, we've already established heat wave here in New England.
Oh my God, you're literally wearing underwear right now. That's all you're wearing.
Yes, but I'm super comfortable. You want to know why?
Why?
Look close. What kind of underwear is it?
Tommy John.
It is.
Oh, damn.
Okay, ladies, you're just going to have to visualize.
No.
What it's... No, okay.
Just visualize it on your own husband.
I'm going to say that if I were down in sweaty Mississippi,
yes,
I would definitely want to be wearing my Tommy Johns. They've got new men and women's cool cotton underwear. It's perfect for the season. It keeps you 2 to 3 times cooler and dries 4 to 5 times faster than normal cotton. And just like all Tommy John underwear, cool cotton never rides up. Take a look. Is it riding up?
I don't want to look. I'm just going to look with one eye. Yeah, it's not riding up.
Stick to your plans, not your clothes, with the new cool cotton from Tommy John. Hurry to TommyJohn.com/crime for 20% off your first order. By the way, this is another item that Rebecca tried once on the podcast and then oh no, she's pulling them out. Oh yes, you have Tommy Johns on too.
That's all I wear now.
Yes,
love them.
You bought a bazillion pairs
Sorry,
after that.
I did.
All right, this is what we spend our money on. Go to. You can still get the deal though. TommyJohn.com/crime for 20% off your first order. That's TommyJohn.com/crime.
All right, now it's time for a favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the crime of the week. It was a terrible car accident outside of Johannesburg. The paramedics diagnosed the female driver as dead at the scene and transported her body to a South African morgue and placed it in the fridge. When a worker came to check on the body, you guessed it, she was still breathing. The paramedics claim the patient showed, quote, no form of life, and an executive at the ambulance company says their crews are properly trained and there is no proof of any negligence on their part. Interestingly, this was not the first time this has happened in South Africa. Media reports say other patients have been discovered alive at the morgue, including one who woke up screaming on a slab. So a question for the panel, what do you think this woman's first words were when she, quote, came back from the dead? Lara Bricker, what do you think her first words were?
Is this now? Is this real?
Very, very good, Lara Bricker. Excellent Westworld reference. Toby Ball, what do you think her first words were when she came back from the, quote, dead?
It's cold as fuck in here.
Kevin Flynn, what about you?
Not dead yet. I think she probably said, look, I know this was really bad, but considering where I am, what's the worst that could have happened?
You know what I think her first words were?
What?
When the hell is Serial Season 3 coming out?
Oh.
All right, Lara Bricker, before we wrap up the podcast this week, do we have a cat of the week?
We do. Oh my God. I have to tell you, this was my favorite thing. I watched it over and over. I'm going to watch it again now. Cindy Pasca and her cat Indy sent me this nice...
I would like to nominate myself for Cat of the Week. P.S.
What the...
I think Lara Bricker is the best crime writer on.
So, Cindy, well played. And her cat, by the way, looks exactly like my cat Felix. So it's not a stretch. So nice job, Cindy.
Oh, that's right. That animated cat nominating itself. I agree. It deserved to win. So, Lara Bricker, if people want to send you their Snapchat or other weird-ass videos of their animals nominating themselves to be Pet of the Week, how can they find you online? Perhaps on Twitter.
At Lara Bricker.
And Joey Ball, people want to reach out to you and perhaps, support you in your desire to persecute those who want to prosecute death penalty cases with no evidence. How can they find you online?
I don't think they're going to be able to fit that into a tweet, Rebecca. But it's at Toby Ball NH.
And Kevin Flynn, people want to reach you on Twitter. How can they find you?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And you can reach me on Twitter and Instagram at Reb Lavoie. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Crime Writers On. Just go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, and subscribe to Stitcher Premium at stitcherpremium.com/crime and use the code CRIME at checkout, and then you will get a free month. And you also get access to our exclusive Stitcher Premium show, Married with Podcast. You can also support the show on patreon.com/partners in crime media. And when you do, you will get access to Toby's Balls Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Our theme song was performed by the New York Ska Jazz Ensemble and used with permission. This podcast was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, aka the closet in our basement that's actually way too clean and mold-free to store any Mississippi law enforcement documents. On behalf of the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
It's an A+ listen. Just like the A+ sleep I got last night on my bed linen sheets.
Brooklyn? You mean Brooklyn?
I screwed that one up. It was so good. It was so good. I have to take it again.
Yeah, just like the...
Partners in Crime Media.
Kind makes delicious, healthy snacks using whole ingredients. Now you can try 20 Kind snacks with their new snack pack. Enjoy 50% off and free shipping on your first snack pack when you subscribe to it through Snack Club, Kind's monthly snack subscription service. Go to kindsnacks.com/crime for more details. That's kindsnacks.com/crime to learn more and subscribe to the snack pack.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.